Christian parenting.
What do you do when you find out that your child is the bully? That's the predicament my guest, Crystal Paine, found herself in today, and it's the next conversation in our Parenting Challenge series.
I didn't set a good example of expressing my feelings. I am a good stuffer, and I'll just stuff it down and try to cover it up until all of a sudden it just all comes out. And so learning in those little things, when are those little red flags, those things when you feel like something's not quite right or you're feeling triggered, learning to pay attention to that, because those are warning signs that something's not right.
Hey, my name is Jay Holland, and this is Let's Parent on Purpose. It's a podcast to help you thrive and not just survive your parenting years. Each week, I'll bring you an insight or an interview that will help strengthen your marriage, your family, or your personal walk with Jesus. And if you find it helpful, I encourage you to subscribe, share it with your friends, and you're welcome to go to letsparentonpurpose.com to find all kinds of past articles, issues, and resources to help your family. So here's one of those episodes that you hope never actually applies to you. You hope that you're listening for a friend, but if you have children, you have the opportunity for this to be the case for them. What happens when the school calls you or calls you in because your child has been the one to become the bully? It can be very disorienting, humiliating. There's a lot of personal ego attached to our child's behavior, and sometimes their behavior is our fault. Sometimes we're part of the issue, and sometimes it's beyond our control. And those are really difficult things to walk through. So I am really pleased to bring to you today my guest, Crystal Paine. Crystal is the New York Times bestselling author and podcast host who's also well known as the Money Saving Mom. You might have checked out her website, moneysavingmom.com. If you haven't, you should check it out. You'll find a lot of good deals on there. Crystal has penned a vulnerable new book called Love-Centered Parenting that's out this month in March of 2021. In this book, she candidly shares about the day she found out her child was a bully, was being expelled from their school, was depressed and suicidal. Sitting in the emergency room with her and husband and child, it felt like her world was crumbling around her, and Crystal hit her all-time parenting low. But she also heard the voice of God say, "I love you." We have a really helpful conversation. Again, you hope that you're not somebody that can super identify with this, but you just might be. And I want to encourage you, even if you have the sweetest, kindest, nicest children in the world who would never be accused of bullying, it's important for you to listen to this conversation. I have been on the other side of this. I've been on both sides of it. I have been the one who, my child has some behavior issues that are just beyond my control and sometimes are humiliating. At the same time, I've been that judgmental parent that's looking at some other child's behavior and just thinking all kinds of terrible things about how their mom and dad must raise them. And so this is a conversation that is important for all of us to be a part of. I want to thank you guys so much for continuing to listen to, and those of you who help support Let's Parent on Purpose, which you can do so at letsparentonpurpose.com. And if you're fairly new to the podcast, I want to encourage you to pick up Fun Family Conversations and your Marriage Snapshot tool. You get those free for joining my Things for Thursday email list, and you do that just by simply texting the word THINGS to 66866. That's THINGS to 66866. Give you all kinds of goodies, free resources, and things to help you in your parenting. Hey, without further ado, I want you to enjoy this conversation and share it with a friend. Here's my talk with Crystal. Crystal, thank you so much for joining today. It's a real honor to have you on Let's Parent on Purpose.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So my wife was really excited when I told her that I was interviewing the Money Saving Mom. When we were early married and pretty poor, she visited your blog quite a bit. Can you give, because I think it'll help in the conversation that we're going to have today, can you give a little bit of a background about that and kind of like what your journey has been in that sense?
Yes. So my husband and I got married 18 years ago, which is crazy to think. And he had had this goal that he was going to go to law school and we wanted to do it debt free. And so we also had this goal that we wanted to let God control our family size. And so we didn't know how that was all going to happen, but we were just trusting God. And so he started in on his law school journey. I ended up pregnant and really sick and couldn't work. And so I was just praying about, God, what can I do? Because we want to stay out of debt, but we also need to, have a roof over our head
Mhm.
and food on the table. And so in the process of that, I fell into this thing called blogging, and it was a brand new phenomenon back then. This was 2004-ish. And just started in blogging and learned a lot and discovered that people were very fascinated with the topic of saving money, how we were living on such a tight income and cutting our grocery bill and all of that. So I ended up starting Money Saving Mom in 2007 and really had no idea that it was going to take off and become our primary source of income for our family. My husband was able to actually come home full time, and we have been running Money Saving Mom full time as a couple since 2014. We moved to Tennessee, and so it has turned into something so much bigger than what we could have ever dreamed or imagined. But we look back to those law school days when we were in the beans and rice budget in this little basement apartment, wondering how we were going to pay our rent check. And we see how God used that to build our faith. And then He had something so much greater than we could have ever dreamed or
Mm.
imagined.
That's awesome. Um, I'm imagining to run a successful blog. There has to be a degree of transparency that you have with those, even if it's on money, and because they're wanting kind of a view into your family and how things actually work out. So I'm imagining over the course of building this up, you've probably shared quite a bit with those who read, and there's a lot of people who feel like they have an in on your personal life. But the truth is, just because you might have one thing nailed down in your family and personal life doesn't exclude you from an enormity of challenges in every other area. And sometimes those can complicate things. So I was looking through your book that you have recently put out, the love centered parenting, and you're sharing a story of just being blindsided by something that was happening in one of your children's lives. Would you care to share that with us?
Yes. So my husband and I, like I said, we kind of set out on this journey of life and marriage, thinking, we actually wanted to have 12 kids. We were going to homeschool all of them, and we were kind of going to be the poster child for poster family for godly families. And
Wow.
I remember that we actually went to our first homeschool conference when our first baby was actually in utero. I think I was 12 weeks along or something. I mean, we really we were going to have this in the bag. And as life went along, it doesn't pan out like envision that it will.
You
And there
don't
were
say. Yeah.
a lot of hard things that happened, and it wasn't according to our neat little plan. And I feel like we had really gone into it thinking, if you make good choices, you follow God, you honor God, then you're going to be blessed. And for us, blessing was things were going to go well for us.
Right.
Like that's what we envisioned. And little did we dream that you can make all the right choices, quote unquote,
Mhm.
and that doesn't mean that your life is going to be smooth sailing. And I really feel like looking back, some of the greatest hardships have turned into some of the greatest blessings. And so we had 3 kids in 5 years. And then as they got a little bit older, we were, committed to this homeschool thing. And then our oldest daughter started really struggling. I talk about this in the book with just social anxiety and figuring out how do you interact with other kids because she was homeschooled and
Mm.
just with us so much. And so when she was about, I think she was 10, we just started noticing that it was getting really bad. She couldn't even be in a room with other kids before she just would shut down. And so we started trying to put her into some different activities and trying different things, and it just wasn't working. So over the course of a lot of prayer and time, we decided to put our kids in this little Christian school. And we thought, okay, we're going to trust God. We're going to do this. It was such a good thing, but it was also a real challenge for one of our kids. And some things that had been simmering under the surface really came to light in this environment. And we didn't know it at the time, but that they were being labeled a bully at school. And there was just a lot of stuff that was happening that we were completely, like, we just were naive. We thought everything was going along pretty well until one day, after months and months of this child being in the school, we got a call. At drop off, the principal said, I need to meet with you. And we're like, what? What? You could just tell something was really wrong. And it ended up that this child then ended up getting expelled from the school.
Wow.
And had, just because there was some really major things that had happened. And for us, it was like our neat little world just came crashing down. And, I'm like, but we're trying to do the right things, and what's going on? And, I thought that we were raising our children in the right way. And I feel like God just had to kind of pull the carpet out from underneath me and, say, like, you need to go back to square one. And you're trying to do this in your own strength. You're trying to fix and solve and bubble wrap and overprotect. And you're not walking with your kids. But it took me a long time to get there, and therapy for our child and a lot of things. But I'm so grateful looking back, because I feel like even though I'm so sad that my child had to go through that and ended up becoming very suicidal and spiraling out, I needed that wake up call. And God used it for so much good in our whole family, because just completely changing the way that we approach parenting has radically transformed our home.
Wow. So I'm thinking back to that day when you're called in, or was it you or your husband was called in?
Both of us.
Okay, both of you are called in
Yes.
to talk to the administrator, and you're told your child has been bullying other kids, and we're going to remove them from the school. I got to think there's at least two major streams of emotion going on right at that point. One of them is, what's going on? What does this mean about my child? But the other is, what does this mean about me? Because I've noticed in my life that there is nothing that my ego is attached to more than my perception of my parenting. And that starts back from like being, with a newborn kid, and you really have no idea what you're doing, but it's so hard to take advice and instruction from those who've been before you. And so getting to this point where you think that you've got it all together, or at least moderately together, and then to have something like that happen, is that something you were experiencing? Is just this coinciding what's going on with my child, but also what does this mean about me?
Yes, I think there were so many emotions in that. And as we walked through the weeks, because at first it was just the principal kind of presented to us, this had happened at school the day before, something really bad that had happened. And I think you feel so blindsided because we didn't even know. It wasn't like our child came home and said, I did this terrible thing, or I had, like, our child was acting like everything was fine. And in fact, when we knew we were going to meet with the principal, we said to our child, did something happen? Or like, no, they knew, but they weren't even willing to admit it to us. And so I think there was, not only dealing with our child has been deceiving us, because there's been a lot of stuff that's been going on that they're not telling us about, and feeling like hurt in that sense as a parent, but then also thinking, what are other people thinking? And we then found out that there had been a lot of people had come to the principal about our child. There had been a lot of talking that had happened and a lot of things that had gone down that we had no clue. And so here I showed up to all these school functions having no idea
Wow.
that this is how I was viewed as a parent. And I even remember one time, when I was in a meeting with one of the parents, that my child had hurt their child. And I remember, them just looking at me and saying, something is really wrong in your home for this to have gone down. And I didn't know what to do with that, because I'm thinking, you feel so much shame and you feel so much guilt. And yet on the other hand, you're just so desperate to try to figure out, how do I help my child?
I want to end our conversation. So this is coming in a little bit of just what the Lord has done in teaching you personally and the spiritual journey that you've had, but I do want to kind of focus in on this bullying thing for a little bit, because I know it's a big deal and it's a very hot topic just culturally right now. Was bullying even something on your radar before this happened?
We were in shock that when we found out that our child had been labeled a bully, like we were just in shock. We knew that there had been some, all children had kind of have to figure out their way with other kids. And we knew that there had been like some little conflict things,
Mhm.
but we just thought, oh, that's just part of growing up. And we had, you know, tried to work through that and have conversations and stuff. But no, we were just really, really shocked. And I remember just thinking, my heart went out to so many moms who you feel like you're the mom of that kid.
Yeah.
You have that kid that everybody's like, "Oh yeah, I don't know what's going on at their house, but not very good because clearly, it's just not they're not doing a good job of
Right.
raising their child." You just feel that sense.
Yeah, so we've been involved in fostering and adoption, out of the foster system for a number of years. And I mean, I remember on a vacation in a restaurant, um, I could see something coming in our little one, and I knew it was going to go bad. There was nothing I knew there's nothing I can do about this. Like I can see the mood set on their face. There's nothing I can do. And I end up carrying this child kind of over my shoulder as they're like kicking and screaming and hitting me, like out of the front door, through the parking lot, into the car, feeling the judgment of every human being on me and thinking, yeah, I know what they're thinking because I've thought the very same thing when I've watched this happen with other ones. And I always automatically assume it's just a bad parent. And not realizing, not having the sympathy for how many other things could be going on. So it's a very humbling thing, as a parent, to all of a sudden be in over your head on an issue that there's nothing in your life experience, there's nothing in the wheelhouse that you've collected so far wisdom wise that helps you know how to handle this situation. So for you guys, you're all of a sudden now in a crash course education on, why do these things happen? What are some of the common symptoms behind them? So what have you learned just in general about, kids that are involved in bullying at schools? Are there some commonalities that can happen, for why these behaviors are taking place?
I always feel like that there's something under the surface, and
Mhm.
that's something that we've talked with our kids about a lot, is that never take something at face value when it seems like it's really out of whack. If a child says something to you at school that is really off the wall or is acting a certain way, always know that there's probably a whole lot more there, and probably a lot of hurt and a lot of baggage. And so just to give grace is the first thing. And I think this whole thing has made us so much more compassionate to other families, compassionate to other kids, and that there is oftentimes, mental illness and things like that at play, which is what we ended up finding out in our
Mm.
situation after a lot of therapy and a lot of testing and that sort of thing. But to give that grace, and then also to, I'm just always encouraging parents, let's dig deeper. It's so easy to want to just kind of try to fix, they're like,
Right.
let's put a bandage on, no, you don't do that. No, you don't hit. No, you're not supposed to mouth off at that, that sort of thing. But where's that coming from? And so to really dig down deep, and that for us was a big process of just really unearthing that and learning for this child to learn how to express feelings. Because if you don't know how to express feelings, they're going to usually come out sideways as
Mm.
anger. And a lot of times
Yeah.
that's going to be bullying. And so working with a therapist to learn how to express feelings. And it took months and months and months. And at first, when we started, I was like, I don't even know why we're doing this. Like, this child, it feels so far gone at this point, but week in and week out of them practicing feelings and understanding, learning how to really explain what they were feeling, it started to actually, things were, I'm like, what did you just say? And I
Mm.
started to realize that it is possible, but it's helped us all because I know for me, I didn't set a good example of expressing my feelings.
That's
I
good.
am a good stuffer and I'll just stuff it down and try to cover it up until all of a sudden it just all comes out. And so learning in those little things, when are those little red flags, those things when you feel like something's not quite right or you're feeling triggered, learning to pay attention to that because those are warning signs that something's not right.
We had Sissy Goff on recently. I'm a big fan of hers, and she talks a lot about helping your kids develop an emotional vocabulary. This is something before coming across that term, I'd never even thought about it, but it's so important because if they don't have the words to express what's going on, then they revert to actions. Whether they're positive actions or whether they're stuffing and repressive actions, and so just simple things that you can practice with kids, because sometimes it's hardest for them to express their own emotions in there. So you can practice emotional vocabulary as you're watching things together with your child. Of like, hey, what do you think that face means? As you're walking down the street, or just use the everyday examples around you to help take things beyond how do you feel, bad, good. Like the broader their vocabulary, the more they're going to be able to get at what's inside. But it is a long process, and if there's a lot of emotional turmoil going on, it's really hard sometimes to do that. So as you guys are learning this, first off, just another quick question. If a parent finds themselves in this situation where all of a sudden they're seeing bullying activity in their child, where do they go? Like, where are some helpful places to go for resources or equipping or help? What would you recommend?
That's a great question. And we really struggled when this all kind of came to a head all of a sudden. It was like,
Mhm.
it felt like it came out of nowhere. And, it didn't come out of nowhere, but we just weren't seeing the signs.
Right.
And we struggled because we were like, what do we do? And we started calling different counselors and therapists, and a lot of them, because of the severity of where we were at, they just said, I'm sorry, we can't take your child. Like, that's too severe. And it felt very overwhelming. And I think I would just encourage parents, first off, if you know anyone who has walked through something, to really connect with them so that you
Mhm.
know that you're not alone.
That's
I've
good.
just sat with so many moms over coffee, and we've just, I just to look them in their eye and say, you're not alone. Like, you're not the only mom who is struggling with this. You're not alone. And then also asking around for resources of, if someone knows if there's a good counselor or therapist. I think a lot of times churches can be great resources to ask them for recommendations, because you want to find someone who is a great fit for your child, and maybe your child does not need that. Like you talked about Sissy Goff, I love her book Raising Worry-Free Girls, and I always recommend that to any parent who they feel like their child is sensing some sort of anxiety or just unrest or worrying about things. Or a lot of times even the bullying can be coming from that
Right.
insecurity or the anxiety. And so I think that's a really fantastic resource, because she kind of walks you through when you need to get professional help. And I don't think you always need that, but I think there are some great resources. I also really love the Whole Brain Child. I think that is a
Mhm.
really fantastic resource for helping your child with just having those conversations, learning to use that emotional vocabulary, really understanding how their brain processes things, and being able to walk through stuff and learn to de escalate situations, and teaching them those tools. So, those are two resources that I always recommend to parents. I also think if you're dealing with a child who maybe, they have had some trauma in their past, I think that the book The Body Keeps the
Yeah,
Score
that's
is also a
fantastic.
really fantastic one as well. And so just becoming a student of your child and learning these things so that you can help them, and making sure that you're not just trying to slap on a bandage, or that you want to protect your reputation and you care so much about your reputation that you're not walking with them in relationship, and
Yeah.
to know that it's going to take time. It is not going to be a quick fix. And in a lot of these cases, it's not going to be something where, you're going to take them to therapy or you're going to read a book or whatever. And then in a year from now, they're going to be totally, fixed or whatever,
Right.
because It's a lifelong process and a lifelong journey, but I think for us to be able to understand some of what they're feeling and struggling with, and to be able to model good responses to them and good emotional vocabulary for them, it can be such a huge help to them so that they feel like they're not just alone and
Mm.
scared and just overwhelmed with all their big feelings.
Let's Parent on Purpose has always been about equipping moms and dads to build thriving families centered around the hope of the gospel. If you regularly listen to this podcast, you're actually among a community of parents that span 68 countries, including many in the 1040 window, where there are few churches and limited access to the gospel. As the amount of content I produce over the years grows, so do the cost of maintaining, storing, and producing all of the different details that help make this show helpful. If God has put you in a place where you might be able to help a little bit and support this work, would you please consider going to letsparentonpurpose.com/support and either giving a one-time gift or becoming a regular supporter through Patreon? If you're not in a good place to support the show, that's fine. I pray you continue listening, growing, and sharing it with others. That's it. No hard push. Just a simple request that if you're able to and would like to, help share the load of the show at www.letsparentonpurpose.com/support. Yeah, fair warning to those listening. The resources you mentioned are fantastic, but just want to let you know, you start reading these to get help for your kids, and you're going to get smacked in the face because it's going to apply to you as well. The Body Keeps the Score is a phenomenal book. It's big. So I was tackling it in an audiobook, and I remember it's funny, I was on my roof with a leaf blower listening to it in my head, and he starts talking about a particular effect on that trauma can have on your capacity to experience joy. And I was like, oh my gosh, he just labeled something that I knew that I experienced, but I never had the words to put it to place. But this is a big part of the health process. Like you think of a fish tank, like your fish are never going to be healthier than the tank that they're swimming in. And your kids are going to have issues, but they're never going to be healthier than the home environment that they're living in. And so I just think back to something you said towards the very beginning, Crystal, when you said, as you were putting your kids in this Christian school, you said, we said, we're going to trust God and do this. And then as you get into this process, it probably is like, God, we trusted you, and all of this crap happened. But the truth is, this stuff was in there. I had a mentor one time that he said, we're all like tea bags, and the hot water that comes in our life reveals what's in the tea bag. The hot water doesn't create the tea. It just reveals the content of the tea bag. And so had you all stayed in this homeschool environment, some of these issues would have still been there, but they may have never come out until your child was released into the adult world, another decade down the road. And that could be very difficult to ever come back from. So we're going to trust God, and then God allows things to happen that we don't want. And we have to remember to trust him in the middle of that as well. So I would love for you to talk to what has God done in your life and in your perspective on your relationship with God, as well as your relationship in parenting with you and your husband parenting your kids through all of this.
Yes. So we finally found a therapist who was willing to take our child. And it came after we had ended up at the ER because our child was suicidal and a lot of other things. But so we go into this therapy session, and I had a really kind of bad taste in my mouth about therapy. Like, unless you're in a really bad state, like you can just pray and read your Bible and,
Yeah.
it's going to be okay. And so I was already feeling kind of this stigma but I was like, I don't know. I'm at my wit's end. So we went in there, and I remember we had our first session, my husband and I, without our child, and we sat on the couch, and I was looking at the therapist, and I said, we just want to do whatever it takes. And so in the process, if you come up with some things that you feel like that, I can work on too, if you could just let me know. And I really didn't expect that, she was going to actually make good on that offer. But a few weeks later, she calls me in after she had dismissed my child. She calls me in and she said, I really think that you're trying so hard to fix your child.
Mm.
And what would it look like to just walk with them and love them? And I started paying attention to my responses, and so much of what I was doing and so much of how I was parenting was to fix.
Huh.
If my child would do something, it's like I'm instantly saying, no, that's wrong. Here's what you need to do. And I'm just constantly nitpicking at what
Mm.
they're doing wrong. And if I'm being honest, it's because in my head, I was playing it out to, how's this going to work in other situations because I cared about what people thought of me.
Yeah.
I cared about my reputation. And so I was parenting for my reputation versus relationship with my kids. And so I started digging into, where is this coming from? Where did this come from in the first place that I care so much about my kids looking good and me looking good? And I realized it was because I didn't truly believe that I was just fully loved by God and just wholeheartedly loved by Him. And I always felt like I wasn't quite good enough. I needed to do more, be more. So if I could have good kids, if I looked like a good mom, that would give me some acceptance before God and
Wow.
acceptance before others. And so it was a real journey for me of going back to square one, not only as a parent, but learning to be reparented by God and letting Him be my Heavenly Father who loves me for exactly who I am. And what would it look like for me if I truly believed that I was fully loved by my Creator, that I didn't have to do more, try more, do better, work harder, that I could just bask and rest and receive His love. And so that was a journey. I chronicle this in the book of just really learning to live as loved and to live out of that love, and then to let that love flow through me to my kids.
Mm.
And that I didn't have to try to fix or bubble wrap or overprotect or solve. I didn't have to worry about what other people thought of my decisions. I could just love my kids with the love that God had given me. And I could just pour into them and walk with them and lean in and love them and listen to them and lead them with humility, and then ultimately let go, because I can't control my kids' choices. I can't control the outcome of my parenting. All that God requires of me is faithfulness. And so to walk with His love, basking in His love, and just say, I'm just going to take the next step. I'm just going to take the next step, and whatever that looks like. And so if my child is acting out, to, instead of just wanting to instantly, be like, stop that right now, but instead to say, okay, God, how do I lean in and love them in this situation? What does that look like? Just earlier this week, one of my kids was struggling, and I wanted to just be like, would you just, have a better attitude? But I realized that I didn't spend a lot of time with them recently, that we hadn't just
Mm.
kind of sat and been together. And I thought, I think they're feeling like they would just love some more attention. And, what would that look like for me to just step into their world? And so I did. And it's interesting because just 24 hours of making that my focus, of just being like, I just want to be with my child more. And their attitude completely changed. And this isn't like a fix all sort of thing. But when my attitude towards my child changes, I feel like that there's something in me that changes. And then a lot of times that also causes them to just de escalate
Yeah,
and feel just calmer and more loved as well.
that's great. Hey, tell us where to find your new book. And if they have more interest in you, where can they go? We're going to put all of these links in the show notes. So you don't have to take your hands off the wheel as you're driving, but tell them where they can find your new book, and remind them the title.
Yes, so my new book is called Love Centered Parenting, the No Fail Guide to Launching Your Kids. And it is available wherever books are sold: Amazon, Christian Book, bookshop.org if you want to support local bookstores, or also your local bookstores.
That's great. Hey, Crystal, I really appreciate you joining us. Would you care, as we close out, would you pray for the moms and dads that might be in this same spot where they're trying to figure out what to do as they realize some bullying or some challenging tendencies in their own kids? Would you pray for those listening right now?
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, I just think of the parents that are listening right now. God, I don't know their story. I don't know what they're carrying right now. But God, I just pray that every mom and dad who is hearing these words right now would know that they are not alone, that you are with them. You are Emmanuel. You are God with us. You are with them right now, even in what might feel like just the darkest pit of despair, or what might feel like just overwhelm because they don't know what to do and they want so badly to raise their children well. I pray that you would help each parent listening to lay the burden down of having to fix and bubble wrap and overprotect their kids, of having to feel like it's all on them to raise godly kids. They could lay it down and rest in you and receive the love that you have for them in spite of when they make mistakes, in spite of when they mess up, in spite of when they need to go back and ask forgiveness, that you love them and that they could love out of your love for them, that they could live as love and set an example before their kids of your love, because that's one of the greatest gifts that we can give our kids. And I just pray that you would bless each home and family represented in the listeners, and that together we can raise kids who love Jesus, but who feel so loved by their parents because we know that we are loved by our Heavenly Father. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Friend, if you're still listening all the way to the credits, then I hope that means that this was a particular blessing to you to hear this podcast. If so, I want to encourage you to share it with somebody else that you think might be helped by it. You're welcome to go to letsparentonpurpose.com to find out more information about show notes, about past issues, all kinds of things to help your family. And I do want to say that Let's Parent on Purpose is a user-supported podcast. And if you would like to be a part of that, you can go to letsparentonpurpose.com, learn how to be a supporter through Patreon or through a one-time gift. Thank you so much for listening. Again, share this with somebody that you know needs to hear it. Remember that parenting is a marathon, not a sprint. And we'll talk to you soon.